Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a philosophical system that was created, quite literally, as a systematic cure for human suffering. We're talking about Epicureanism, a philosophy designed not just for, abstract knowledge, but really as a therapeutic tool for practical happiness.
It's a crucial distinction, yeah. For too long, Epicurus was, dismissed, wasn't he? Seen as maybe a proponent of crude sensory indulgence.
Right, just basic hedonism.
Exactly.
Oh.
But as recent scholarship confirms, he built this massive, coherent structure, a whole worldview. It spans physics, epistemology, ethics, even theology.
Wow.
And it's all unified by one single mission, to lead the individual, you, our listener, to tranquility or eudaimonia.
And its modern relevance is, it's undeniable, isn't it? Our sources note this explosive interest in these ideas today. It's generating a kind of argumentative frenzy among contemporary ethical thinkers.
Especially around death.
Yeah, particularly around Epicurus' stance on death. This is a philosophy that speaks directly to the anxieties of, the 21st century.
It really does.
It was even famously practiced in the garden, right? This place where men and women, slaves and citizens lived together in this radical community dedicated to this philosophical pursuit.
That communal environment, it really shows how serious they were about it. The goal wasn't just contemplation, it was application, living it.
Right.
The ultimate aim was achieving well-being by surgically removing the chief sources of human anxiety and fear. Epicurus saw these fears as like diseases of the soul.
Diseases of the soul, I like that.
And for those diseases, he offered a powerful prescription, codified in what is known as the Tetrapharmakon.
The four-part medicine. Okay, that sounds profound. Before we dive into maybe the denser physics stuff, perhaps we should start with the therapeutic core.
Good idea.
What are these four remedies? What do they target?
So the Tetrapharmakon provides four concise arguments. They're designed specifically to eliminate fear.
Okay.
1, the gods are nothing to fear. 2, death is nothing to worry about.
The big ones.
The big ones, yeah. 3, what is good is easy to acquire, meaning, happiness is within reach.
Yeah.
And 4, what is terrible is easy to endure.
Meaning pain.
Meaning physical pain, yeah. It's either short-lived or manageable.
Okay, that immediately lays out the scope of this deep dive, this philosophy. It's fundamentally materialist, right? Atoms and void.
Absolutely. Materialist to the core.
Yet, it's dedicated to this highest form of happiness, Ataraxia, which is the absence of mental disturbance.
Exactly. Tranquility, peace of mind.
Let's unpack maybe the first two remedies, then, through the lens of their ethical foundation. What did Epicurus actually mean by pleasure?
Okay, so we absolutely must begin with the core ethical claim. Epicurus states quite clearly that pleasure is the beginning and end of the blessed life.
The telos, the goal.
Yes, it's the primary good, the proton, kais, and genikon, the measure by which all our choices are judged. Everything comes back to pleasure.
But, when we hear hedonism, the modern mind, it immediately jumps to intense parties, excess, immediate gratification, that sort of thing.
Right, and this is precisely where Epicurus spent enormous effort separating himself from other schools of his time, like the Cyrenaics.
The Cyrenaics. They were the ones focused on immediate bodily pleasure, right?
Yeah, exactly. Intense, present, physical stuff. But Epicurus said, hold on. The feeling, the pathos of pleasure or pain, yes, that's the ultimate criterion of truth for ethics. We're drawn toward pleasure and away from pain by nature. That's fundamental.
Okay.
And this is the key. He insisted there were two distinct kinds of pleasure, and one was far, far superior.
Okay, let's get into that, this crucial distinction. Static versus kinetic pleasure. What's the difference?
Right. So kinetic pleasure is flowing from motion, from agreeable sensations. Think of it as the process of enjoyment.
Like eating when you're hungry.
Perfect example. If you're deeply hungry, the feeling of actively eating a delicious meal and satisfying that hunger, that sensation, that process, that's kinetic pleasure.
Yeah.
It involves movement, change, sensation.
Okay, so if kinetic pleasure is the process of getting satisfied, what is katastematic pleasure?
Katastematic pleasure is the state that results after the process. It's the stable state of satisfaction. It's the feeling of well-being when all needs have been met and all pain has been eliminated.
So it's not an active feeling, but an absence of negative?
Precisely. This state has two components. Aponia, which is the absence of physical pain in the body.
No aches, no pains.
Right. And Ataraxia, which is the absence of mental distress or emotional turmoil in the soul. No fear, no anxiety, no disturbance.
So the greatest pleasure, according to Epicurus, isn't the rush of a massive win or some spectacular sensory experience.
No.
It's the quiet moment when all pain and disturbance are just gone.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly that. It's a massive shift in focus, isn't it? From maximizing positive intensity to achieving a perfect neutral baseline, a state of complete repose.
It's like a digital detox for the soul, as you put it earlier.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The goal isn't to flood the system with new stimuli, but to clear out all the existing noise and distress. Once you achieve this state of complete repose, Aponia and Ataraxia combined, you are, according to Epicurus, at the maximum possible state of pleasure. There is no good lacking.
And crucially, if you're already at that maximum state of tranquility, adding more kinetic pleasure, say drinking fancy wine instead of water when you're not thirsty, doesn't actually increase your happiness.
It doesn't fundamentally increase it, no, because you were already content. The baseline of zero disturbance was already met. This completely reframes the whole pursuit of luxury, doesn't it?
It really does. It explains why the true Epicurean could live very simply.
If the goal is simply the removal of pain, and a simple crust of bread removes hunger just as effectively as a gourmet feast.
Then the bread is preferable.
Often, yes.
Right.
Because it minimizes the anxiety and dependency associated with seeking luxury.
Hmm.
Wanting luxuries creates a need, a desire, and that unmet desire is itself a form of mental pain, a disturbance.
Okay, this philosophical move, it must drastically alter the role of virtues in the system then. If pleasure, this catastematic pleasure, is the only intrinsic good,
Right.
then virtues like prudence, justice, courage, they can't be good in themselves, like Plato or the Stoics would say. They must be purely instrumental.
Exactly. They are simply effective means to secure ataraxia, and that is their only value in the system. They're tools, not ends.
And prudence, for Nisus, seems especially important here.
Oh, absolutely central. Epicurus calls it the source and greatest good. But, and this is key, not because prudence is intrinsically moral or noble.
Why then?
It's the greatest good because it's the rational capacity, the calculating faculty that figures out which actions actually lead to the highest, most stable form of catastematic pleasure over the long run.
So prudence is like the accountant of pleasure and pain. It does the cost-benefit analysis and teaches us that being just or being courageous actually prevents more long-term misery.
That is precisely it. A perfect analogy. Prudence teaches us that the virtues are, in his words, the sole unfailingly effective means to pleasure.
Let's take an example. Justice. How does that fit in?
Okay, justice. Epicurus defines justice not as some cosmic moral law or divine command.
No.
No, simply as a social contract, an agreement not to harm or be harmed. It's about mutual benefit and security.
Now, here's where maybe a rival school like the Stoics might challenge him. Doesn't defining justice purely as a contract for security strip it of all moral weight? What happens if the contract breaks down or, if you're absolutely certain you won't get caught breaking it?
That's the standard challenge, yes. But the Epicurean response is actually quite psychologically astute. It comes back to prudence and ataraxia.
How so?
Prudence dictates that even if you believe you won't be caught for an unjust act, say, cheating someone, you have inevitably introduced a seed of mental turmoil into your own mind.
Ah, the anxiety.
The anxiety, the fear of future exposure, however small the chance, the constant low-level background worry, the uncertainty, this internal mental pain, this lack of ataraxia, far outweighs any temporary kinetic pleasure you might have gained from the unjust act.
So prudence always steers the wise person toward justice, just for the internal peace of mind it brings.
Exactly. For the security it offers,
Yeah.
both external not getting caught and internal not having to worry about getting caught. The value of justice is ultimately the stable absence of the pain of insecurity.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. The system is designed to sort of trap you inside your own prudence, doesn't it? Ensuring the path to peace is always through what we traditionally call virtue.
It guides you there, yes. But to follow this ethic of stable pleasure effectively, you first need absolutely certain tools. Tools to tell you what's real in the world and what's just a false fear or a bad judgment.
Right. You need a reliable way of knowing.
Which takes us from ethics to the foundation of knowledge itself.
The Epicurean canon.
Right. A truly tranquil life. It can't be built on shaky foundations.
Yeah.
You can't be at peace if you don't trust your grasp on reality.
Makes sense.
So Epicurus' entire therapeutic mission required a coherent, systematic understanding of the world. And that understanding had to start with what we know to be undeniably true. He established the canon, the rules of inquiry, the criteria for truth.
Okay, and he listed 3 criteria, right? Sensations,
Atheist, yes.
preconceptions,
Prolepsis.
And feelings, pleasure, and pain.
Yes.
The fact that feelings, pleasure, and pain are granted the same status as the senses in determining truth, that speaks volumes about the priority of the ethical mission, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It shows everything is ultimately in service of achieving that tranquil state. But let's focus on the senses first, because Epicurus makes a claim that was, well, pretty radical for its time.
What was that?
He claimed that all sensations are true and infallible, every single one.
Infallible. What about optical illusions? Or dreams? Or madness? Surely the senses trick us sometimes. That was a common view, even then.
It was. And this claim was a direct rebuke to the skeptics and even some other materialists who believed the senses were unreliable guides.
Okay, so how does he justify infallibility? If I look at a tower from a distance and it looks small, but then I walk up close and it's clearly huge, wasn't my first sensation wrong?
This is the pivotal moment in his epistemology. He argues the senses themselves do not lie. They are accurate reporters of the stimulus they receive at the moment of perception.
Okay.
Error, he argued, arises not from the sensation itself, but from the mind adding perceptual judgment doxa to that raw sense data.
So when I look at the distant tower, my eye accurately reports the atomic streams hitting it, and because it's distant, those streams are maybe finer or more scattered.
Exactly. The sensation itself is true to the input received. The smallness is a real property of the image hitting your retina at that distance.
Yep.
The error is the judgment. The doxa, the mental leap that concludes the tower itself, is small. The mind jumps beyond the immediate sensation to make a conclusion about the object, often influenced by insufficient information or prior assumptions.
And his atomic theory helped explain this, like the ore in water looking bent.
Precisely. He argued that objects constantly shed thin films of atoms, like skin's idola or simulacra, which travel to our sense organs. And ore in water looks bent because the atomic images, the idola, traveling from the ore to your eye, are refracted, bent, as they pass through the denser medium of water.
So the sensation of bent is an accurate reading of the stimulus actually received by the eye.
Yes, even though it doesn't match the object's true shape out of the water. The sensation reports what arrives. The senses, he argued, cannot refute one another. Sight says the ore looks bent, touch says it feels straight. Both are reporting accurately on their respective inputs. Only the judgments the mind adds on top of sensation can be false.
Okay, that's a subtle but really powerful idea. If sensations are the raw, infallible inputs, then the second criterion, preconceptions or prolepsis, they must be how we organize those inputs into useful knowledge.
Exactly. Think of prolepsis as the mind's foundational mental database. It's the result of repeated sense impressions being collected, stored, and generalized by the mind.
Like learning what a dog is.
Perfect. If a child sees countless examples of furry, four-legged creatures that bark, the mind automatically forms the prolepsis of a dog. It's a general, reliable concept, a mental template formed naturally from experience.
I like the idea someone used of comparing this to modern machine learning data sets.
Yeah.
You train an AI on millions of images, the resulting model that allows it to recognize a horse in a new picture, that recognition capability is its prolepsis.
That's a fantastic modern analogy, yes. And this prolepsis is absolutely essential for inquiry, for even using language meaningfully. If you want to ask, is justice beneficial? You must first have an established prolepsis of justice, a shared understanding of the concept before you can even begin to investigate its benefits.
So these preconceptions act as a primary test for the truth or falsity of statements.
They do. They're one of the criteria. If a statement clashes violently with a clearly established, naturally formed preconception derived from experience, then the statement is likely false or empty, as Epicurus called it.
And this is where Epicurus uses his epistemology, his theory of knowledge, to systematically demolish common beliefs, particularly those that breed fear and anxiety.
Yes, precisely. This is where the canon becomes a therapeutic tool.
Okay.
Consider a common philosophical or religious claim like, the soul is incorporeal.
Okay. Something Plato might say.
Right. Epicurus would argue this is an empty phrase because it directly contradicts our established prolepsis. Our shared concept of incorporeal, based on observing things like the void or space, means something that cannot act or be acted upon. It has no physical interaction.
But the soul clearly does act on the body.
Obviously. It drives movement, it causes thoughts, it registers feelings, it makes us blush or tremble. It clearly interacts physically with the body's atoms.
So the statement, the soul is incorporeal, is false because it violates the basic meaning of incorporeal established by our experience.
Exactly. It's self-contradictory based on the preconceptions derived from sensation. And this is how the canon works systematically to eliminate popular superstitions and rival philosophical claims. If it isn't grounded in clear sensation or a reliable preconception, it's just noise. And noise creates Ataraxia, mental disturbance.
Which is the enemy of happiness.
The ultimate enemy.
So this systematic grounding in sensation and preconception, it's fundamentally aimed at dismantling the two greatest human anxieties, right? Fear of the gods and fear of death. The first two parts of the Tetrapharmakon.
Absolutely. Those are the big targets.
Let's tackle the theological fear first. It's fascinating because Epicurus was often derided as an atheist, even in antiquity. But you're saying he genuinely believed in gods.
He did, quite firmly. But not in the way most people thought then or think now. He believed in them because, according to his canon, they exist as objects of perception.
How do we perceive them if they don't interact with the world?
Through very fine, subtle atomic images. Those simulacra, or idola again, which travel through the cosmos and can directly strike the mind, especially during sleep or quiet contemplation. So these gods are real, material, existing beings made of atoms.
Material gods made of atoms.
Yes, very fine, stable atoms. They are living beings, incorruptible and happy. Their existence isn't just based on these perceptions, though.
He had a physical justification, too.
He did, rooted in a principle called isonomia.
Isonomia? What's that?
It basically means equal distribution or balance in the universe. The principle suggests that because the universe is infinite and the number of destructible things, like mortals and worlds, is infinite, then to maintain balance, the class of indestructible, immortal beings must also be infinite.
Ah, so it's a kind of cosmological necessity for the god's existence to keep things balanced.
Sort of, yes. It provides a physical rationale within his atomic system for why such perfect, immortal beings must exist, reinforcing their reality beyond just the mental images we receive.
Okay, so he confirms their existence. But then in the next breath, he seems to render them completely powerless, stripping them of any practical relevance to human life or the running of the cosmos.
And that is the therapeutic masterstroke. That's the cure for the fear, the doctrine of inactivity.
You do.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing related to us or the world. The gods are supremely blessed, perfectly happy, and therefore completely tranquil, completely self-sufficient. They are in a permanent state of ataraxia.
And intervening in the world would disrupt that.
Totally. To reward or punish humans, to manage thunderstorms or harvest, they would have to have concerns, desires, anger, effort. They would be dependent on external events. They'd experience disturbance.
Such activity would actually downgrade their perfect blessedness, make them less godlike.
Exactly. A truly happy and incorruptible being has no need to act, no reason to interfere. It would be beneath them. Therefore, the traditional fear of divine retribution, a massive source of human anxiety throughout history, is simply eliminated. It's based on a misunderstanding of what true divinity entails. So what function do they serve then, if any?
Their sole function is ethical. They are living ideals of absolute blessedness and ataraxia. They embody the goal we're striving for. Contemplating the peaceful simulacra we receive from them is itself a source of katastematic pleasure and guides our own pursuit of the good life. We should strive, as Epicurus said, to live like a god among men.
They are role models, not rulers.
Perfect summary.
Okay, so by dealing with the gods that way, he addresses the first cure of the Tetrapharmakos. The gods are nothing to fear. Now for the second, and perhaps the most challenging cure, certainly the one that gets the most debate today, the harmlessness of death. Death is nothing to us.
Yes. This argument flows just as logically and rigorously from his physicalism, from the atomic theory.
How does it work?
Remember, we are complex arrangements of atoms. That includes the soul, which is also made of very fine, particularly mobile atoms dispersed throughout the body. At the moment of death, the body's structure breaks down, and these soul atoms disperse back into the void. The individual, the sentient being, simply ceases to exist, dissolves.
Okay, annihilation of the self at death.
Total annihilation of consciousness and sensation, and if, as the canon states, all good and bad depend on sentience, on aesthesis, on feeling.
Then death, being the absolute absence of sentience, cannot possibly be bad for the person who has died.
Precisely. It can't be good or bad. It's just nothing to the person themselves. The famous logical proof. It's one of the most starkly powerful arguments in philosophy. When we exist, death is not present, but when death is present, we do not exist.
You can't experience the state of being dead.
You cannot. Therefore, the state itself holds no fear. What is there to be afraid of in non-experience?
Now, this is where the modern debate really flares up, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
Critics often argue that, okay, maybe Epicurus successfully removes the anxiety of what happens after death, the state of non-existence, but he struggles to address two very real, very human concerns. First, the fear of the process of dying, which can be painful and happens while we are still sentient. And second, the fear of deprivation, the idea that death is bad because it deprives us of all the future goods, the experiences, the joys we would have had if we'd lived longer, the loss.
Those are the two main counter-arguments, yeah. Regarding the process of dying, Epicurus was quite clear. His argument focused strictly on the condition of being dead, not the potentially painful process of getting there. Pain during dying falls under the general heading of pain, which the fourth part of the Tetrapharmakon addresses. It's either short or tolerable.
Okay, so he compartmentalizes that. What about the deprivation argument, the loss of future life?
He simply rejects the premise that losing potential future experiences can be bad for the non-existent person. If you don't exist, you cannot suffer the loss of future enjoyment. There's no subject there to feel deprived. Who is being harmed by the absence of future good? Not the dead person, because they aren't there.
So the argument forces a really severe cognitive restructuring on you, the listener. It forces you to ask, what exactly am I fearing when I fear death? If it's the state of non-existence itself, I cannot experience that state, let alone experience it as bad.
Exactly. It demands you clarify the object of your fear. Is it the loss for me, impossible after death, or the loss for others, or the loss of my projects? Those might be regrettable, but they aren't my suffering after death.
It seems his argument forces us to distinguish between mourning our own non-existence, which he says is irrational, and mourning the life narrative that gets cut short, or the impact on survivors, or the legacy we leave behind. He really separates the value to the person, the sentient entity, from their story or historical influence.
That's a very good way to put it. And the remaining two cures of the Tetrapharmakon address the other major sources of anxiety that might remain.
Right. Number 3 was, what is good is easy to acquire.
Meaning our natural and necessary desires, basic food, water, shelter, safety, friendship. These are actually relatively simple to satisfy if we manage our expectations. Elaborate luxuries aren't needed for happiness, for Aponia and Ataraxia. So the good life, the tranquil life, is accessible to almost everyone. It removes the anxiety of striving for unattainable things. And the fourth, what is terrible is easy to endure. This tackles physical pain head-on. Epicurus argued intense pain is usually short-lived. Either it passes or it ends in death, which is nothing to fear. Chronic pain, on the other hand, is usually milder background noise that the mind, through philosophical reflection and focusing on past pleasures or the absence of mental turmoil, can learn to endure. The mind can still achieve ataraxia even while the body suffers some level of aponia.
So control desires, understand gods and death are irrelevant to your well-being, accept the limits of pain, and you've basically removed the internal disturbances, the terrashe.
That's the goal. That's the path to ataraxia.
But now we hit a really big snag, inherent to his whole materialist system. If everything is just atoms moving according to fixed physical laws, how do we act freely? How is any of this up to us?
Yes, this is the massive philosophical tight spot. Epicurus, as a follower of Democritus's atomism, found himself backed into.
Because Democritus's view was strictly deterministic.
Absolutely. Atoms move due to their weight and the impacts of other atoms. Every event is necessitated by prior atomic events, stretching back infinitely. There's no room for spontaneity, no room for genuine choice.
So if that's true, then our every decision, the choice to study philosophy, the effort to cultivate virtue, the entire path to ataraxia, it's all just the predetermined outcome of atomic collision.
Exactly. It's necessitated. It couldn't have happened any other way.
And if it's predetermined, then the whole therapeutic mission seems pointless. If our character and our achieving happiness are not genuinely up to us, as he insisted they were disimonauton, then why bother? The philosophy becomes descriptive, not prescriptive.
Precisely. The stakes were incredibly high. Epicurus needed a physical mechanism within his atomic system to break this relentless chain of causal necessity and allow for genuine human agency, for moral responsibility.
And that mechanism is the notorious doctrine of the swerve, the Kleinemann.
Kleinemann, yes. Probably the most controversial aspect of his physics.
Okay, what exactly is the swerve? How did he define it?
It's defined as an uncaused, completely spontaneous minimum deviation of a single atom from its otherwise determined linear downward path through the void.
Uncaused, so totally random.
Uncaused by any prior atomic event, yes. It happens at no fixed time or place. And crucially, it has to be minimum, just the smallest possible nudge off course.
Why minimum?
Because if the swerve were large or frequent, it would make atomic movements chaotic and unpredictable, undermining the very regularities we observe in the world and the possibility of scientific explanation, which Epicurus also valued. It had to be just enough deviation to break the rigid determinism, but not so much as to introduce chaos.
Okay, a tiny, random, uncaused nudge. It sounds a bit ad hoc, like a cosmic roll of the dice just where he needed it. What did he say its functions were?
Well, according to Lucretius, who gives us the most detailed account, it serves two absolutely vital functions. First, a purely physical one, related to cosmology.
Which is?
If all atoms are naturally falling straight down through the infinite void at basically the same speed due to their weight, as Democritus seemed to think, they would just fall in parallel lines forever. They'd never collide.
So no collisions, no way for atoms to hook up and form compound bodies like planets, stars, animals, us.
Exactly. The swerve provides the necessary random deviation that allows these parallel paths to intersect, initiating the collisions and entanglements required for the formation of everything we see. It makes world formation possible.
Okay, that's the physics function. What's the second, the one that salvages the ethical project?
The second function is that it provides the underlying non-determined physical basis necessary for voluntary action in living beings, for free will, essentially.
Yeah. How does that work? How does a random atomic twitch translate into me choosing to raise my hand?
Lucretius uses the example of racehorses straining at the starting gate. They want to surge forward. That initiation of motion comes from within them, from their mind or will, voluntas. He argues this internally generated impulse, this libera voluntas free will, cannot simply be the determined result of external atomic impacts pushing them.
It has to originate internally.
Yes. And for that internal initiation to be possible in a physical system, there must be some element of non-necessitated motion at the atomic level within the soul atoms. The swerve provides that tiny break in the causal chain, allowing the mind to initiate action that isn't simply the endpoint of a long, predetermined sequence.
Okay, but this immediately brings up a huge philosophical problem, one that critics like Cicero jumped all over. If the swerve itself is random and uncaused, how does it support my rational, voluntary action? Doesn't randomness just replace necessity with chance? And isn't acting by chance just as incompatible with genuine responsibility as acting by necessity?
That is the absolute core criticism, often called the randomness objection, and it's a powerful one. How can a random event be the basis for purposeful, rational choice?
So what was the Epicurean counterargument? Did they have one?
They did, though it's subtle and debated. The idea isn't that the swerve directly causes every specific voluntary action, like me deciding to have coffee now. That would indeed seem random.
So what does it do for free will?
Instead, the swerve's role is more foundational. It ensures that the physical substrate of the mind, the soul atoms, is not rigidly locked into deterministic pathways. It introduces just enough indeterminacy, enough play in the system to provide the necessary background condition, the elbow room, for reason, ratio, to operate effectively and have a real, non-predetermined influence on outcomes.
Okay, so the swerve isn't the decision itself. It just makes genuine decision-making possible within a physical system. It opens the door for agency, but our reason, our developed character, has to actually walk through that door.
That seems to be the most plausible interpretation, yes. The swerve breaks the physical necessity, creating the possibility of self-initiated action. But it's our developed rational faculty, our ratio, shaped by learning and philosophical reflection, that actually directs that action towards the goal of ataraxia.
So, while we have a natural atomic constitution, some of us might be naturally more prone to anger, some more to fear, based on the mix of our soul atoms.
Right, our innate temperament.
Reason allows us, over time, to engage in self-development, to consciously reshape our responses and habits. We can learn to control those non-rational psychic feelings.
Yes. Reason can gain mastery over the initial atomic inclinations. The swerve ensures that the outcome of this rational self-development, this whole ethical project of transforming ourselves towards tranquility, is not predetermined from the start. It makes it genuinely up to us.
It guarantees moral responsibility, allows praise and blame in a way that strict democratian determinism couldn't.
That's the crucial ethical payoff, yes. It salvages the entire therapeutic enterprise.
Okay, so having established this foundation, reliable knowledge through the canon, and genuine free will via the swerve, we need to look at how these Epicureans actually interacted with the world around them, with Greek culture and society.
Right.
And this school was notably countercultural, wasn't it? Starting with a really quite radical hostility toward traditional Greek education, the whole system of paideia.
Oh, famously, aggressively hostile, especially in Epicurus's own writings. His advice was startlingly blunt. He literally told a follower, hoist the sail on your raft and flee. All education, paideia.
Flee all education. That's quite a statement. Why such hostility?
He viewed traditional schooling, which heavily involved studying poetry, rhetoric, mythology, as mostly a waste of precious time. Worse, he saw it as actively harmful because it transmitted false, myth-driven beliefs.
Like stories of angry, interfering gods, tragic heroes driven by destructive passions.
Exactly. The destructive lure of myths, as Lucretius later put it. These stories, these cultural narratives, were seen as prime sources of mental disturbance. Ataraxia. They filled people's heads with irrational fears and misguided values. Why waste years reading Homer or the tragedians when only philosophy offers the direct path to peace?
That's fantastic advice maybe for starting a philosophical school, but it creates this huge paradox, doesn't it? The Lucretian paradox. Because Lucretius, Epicurus's greatest Roman popularizer, chose to spend his life composing De Rerum Natura on the nature of things, which is a massive, highly sophisticated, artistically brilliant mystic poem, the very kind of high culture literary work that Epicurus seemed to despise.
Okay.
How did Lucretius square that circle?
He had to justify it, absolutely. And he did so explicitly, using a very famous medical metaphor right in the poem.
What was the metaphor?
He compares his difficult philosophical message, the rigorous atomic physics, the arguments against superstition, and the fear of death, to bitter wormwood medicine, absinthia, that doctors give to sick children.
Bitter medicine. Okay.
Kids won't take it, right? So the doctor coats the rim of the cup with sweet golden honey. The child is tricked by the sweetness into drinking the beneficial, though bitter, medicine.
So the poetry, the beautiful language, the epic form, that's just the honey.
Exactly. Lucretius argues the poetry is simply the honey coating the vital philosophical medicine. The charming form, the rhythm and language are used purely as an instrument, a lure, to attract readers, especially educated Romans steeped in poetic tradition who would otherwise turn away from the dense, potentially bitter philosophical core.
So the poetry isn't valued for its own sake, aesthetically or emotionally, only for its utilitarian function in delivering the Epicurean truth.
That's certainly the justification Lucretius gives. It maintains the absolute primacy of the philosophical therapeutical. The art serves the argument.
It sounds like maybe the school had to soften its stance a bit over time to survive and engage with the broader culture. Did later Epicureans, like Philodemus, whose scrolls we found at Herculaneum, maintain that same level of hostility?
It seems they adapted, yeah. Philodemus, for instance, who lived a couple of centuries after Epicurus, wrote extensively about poetry and rhetoric. He didn't just dismiss them.
So how did he approach them?
He seems to have engaged with poetry not as an ethical end in itself, certainly not, but as a potentially useful starting point, and a forum for ethical discussion and philosophical critique.
So instead of just telling people to flee Homer, maybe he'd use a passage from Homer.
Exactly. Maybe use a discussion about Odysseus's choices, or Achilles' anger, or what makes a good king in the Iliad. But then use that familiar cultural text to subvert its traditional interpretation and steer the conversation towards the correct Epicurean understanding of virtue, pleasure, and tranquility.
So using the culture against itself, in a way. Co-opting its authority to teach Epicurean ethics.
Precisely. The arts and traditional education become a means to an end, a way to engage people already immersed in that culture and guide them towards philosophical truth. It maintains a primacy of the ethical mission, but in a more pragmatic, engaged way.
That adaptability makes sense. And it brings us to perhaps the most moving and maybe the most internally complex element of Epicurean ethics in practice. The role of friendship.
Ah, yes. Friendship, philia.
The sources consistently identify friendship as a major, major good, something actively provided by prudence because it brings security and pleasure. It removes the fear of loneliness, the menetis.
Friendship is absolutely central. Epicurus apparently said, of all the things which wisdom provides to make us entirely happy, much the greatest is the possession of friendship. It's the jewel in the crown of the Epicurean life.
But it also seems to expose the deepest internal tension within their strictly hedonistic system, doesn't it?
It really does. This was clearly something they debated intensely within the school itself. While the relationship undoubtedly starts from a foundation of self-interest, friends provide security, practical help, reassurance, shared pleasures, all of which contribute directly to my own ataraxia.
My own peace of mind.
Yes. But the teaching on friendship seems to have evolved, or at least had different strands, maybe reflecting different levels of philosophical development. Our sources suggest maybe 3 complex stages or positions on friendship within the school.
Okay, what were those 3 positions? How did they grapple with friendship and self-interest?
Well, the first, the most straightforward and pragmatic, is that foundational instrumental view we just mentioned. Friendship is useful. It's valuable because it secures my own pleasure and safety. It's a calculation of prudence.
Standard hedonistic calculation. Makes sense. What's the second position?
The second position seems to elevate the teaching significantly. It asserts that the wise Epicurean sage will feel in the same way towards his friend as he feels towards himself.
Whoa, okay. Feel the same way towards his friend as towards himself. That sounds like more than just usefulness. It suggests a genuine emotional merging. My friend's pleasure becomes effectively equivalent to my own. Their good becomes my good.
It certainly implies that, doesn't it? It suggests a level of empathy and shared identity that seems to transcend purely calculated, instrumental self-interest. You're no longer acting only for your own separate benefit, but for the benefit of this merged self, this us.
That second position already seems to be stretching the boundaries of pure hedonism where only my own feeling matters, but it's still sort of tethered to it through this idea of the merged self, maybe.
You could argue that, yes, it's trying to accommodate deep affection within the hedonistic framework, but the third position recorded is the most radical and the hardest to reconcile.
What's the third one?
The claim that the wise man, the Epicurean sage, might even die for his friend.
Wait, die for his friend? But if one's own pleasure, one's own sensation is the only intrinsic good, how can an act that permanently terminates all possibility of future pleasure for oneself dying ever be compatible with hedonism? That seems like a fundamental, almost unresolvable contradiction.
It absolutely does. And philosophers, both ancient and modern, still debate this point intensely. How could the ultimate self-sacrifice be justified on purely self-interested, pleasure-seeking grounds?
Do they offer any explanation?
Some possible interpretations are floated. Maybe the argument is that the mental satisfaction derived from knowing one acted so virtuously for a friend, or the complete elimination of the intense mental pain of seeing a beloved friend suffer or die when you could have saved them. Perhaps that momentary mental state is considered a pleasure or absence of pain, so intense it outweighs the loss of all future potential pleasures.
That sounds a bit strained, maybe? A rationalization after the fact?
It can feel that way. But perhaps the most compelling reading isn't about finding a perfectly logical loophole. Maybe this statement shows that the commitment to friendship, the lived reality of it in the Epicurean community, was so profound, so absolutely central to their lived experience of the tranquil life, that Epicurus, or his followers, allowed it to create this theoretical tension.
So, implicitly suggesting that some forms of deep human connection and commitment might genuinely override the strict calculus of individual pleasure.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It leaves us with this wonderful philosophical dilemma. Does the Epicurean value friendship only because it brings them personal pleasure and security? Or does the philosophical commitment to that level of profound, even self-sacrificial love actually end up redefining or expanding what pleasure and the good life truly mean within their own system?
The act of ultimate sacrifice for a friend seems to implicitly confirm that the truly tranquil, well-lived life is characterized by these deep human bonds, even if it strains the official logic of the underlying hedonistic theory.
It certainly suggests a richness and depth to the Epicurean life that goes beyond the caricature of simple, solitary pleasure-seeking. #HegOutro. You know, what really stands out as we wrap up this deep dive is the profound systematic coherence of Epicureanism. Every single piece we've looked at, from the atomic physics and the idea of infallible senses, to the quietist theology about inactive gods, the instrumental ethics focused on Ataraxia, the swerve allowing free will. It's all carefully, intricately integrated.
And all serving that singular practical therapeutic goal, achieving tranquil happiness, eudaimonia in this life.
Exactly. It's a complete package designed for living well here and now.
I think the ultimate aha moment for me listening to all this is realizing that Epicureanism asks us to pursue knowledge about physics, about our own minds, not for intellectual vanity, not just to be smart, but purely for the sake of mental peace. Understand the physics to eliminate superstition about the gods or weird phenomena, understand the limits of knowledge, the canon, to eliminate the anxiety of uncertainty or false beliefs. It's knowledge is therapy.
That's perfectly put. And this brings us back to one of the most powerful and I think deeply insightful pieces of practical advice Epicurus gave. It concerned cosmology, particularly explaining phenomena that were far off, hard to observe directly, things like thunder, lightning, eclipses, the phases of the moon.
The traditional sources of ancient fear and superstition.
Exactly. What did people do? They invented angry gods throwing thunderbolts or celestial omens. Epicurus wanted to stop that fear.
So what was his advice? Did he claim to have the one true scientific explanation?
No, quite the opposite. He advised using the method of multiple explanations.
Multiple explanations. How does that work?
In cases where direct observation and certainty weren't possible, because these things were happening far away in the heavens, and where getting the exact answer wasn't actually necessary for achieving peace of mind, he said you should accept multiple different physical explanations as being equally possible so long as they met two conditions.
Okay, what were the conditions?
One, the explanation had to be physically plausible within the atomic framework, no magic. And two, crucially, it must not rely on divine intervention or superstition.
So give me an example.
For instance, he apparently suggested that day and night could be caused by the sun literally circling the earth. Or it could be caused by the sun extinguishing itself each evening on one horizon and a new one rekindling itself each morning on the other.
Wait, extinguishing and rekindling, that sounds odd.
It does to us. But both were considered physically possible mechanisms within his atomic system. And his point was ethically profound, even if the science seems strange now.
What was the ethical point?
It doesn't actually matter for your peace of mind which of those non-superstitious physical explanations is the correct one. What matters is that you have at least one plausible, natural account available to you. Having any such account allows you to eliminate the fear that it's caused by angry gods or portents of doom, and eliminating that fear is the only thing necessary for maintaining your ataraxia.
So certainty about the exact mechanism of distant celestial events is simply not required for happiness. Just ruling out the scary supernatural stuff is enough.
Precisely. Why torment yourself, striving for absolute certainty about things you can't possibly verify directly, when multiple plausible natural explanations achieve the therapeutic goal equally well?
Okay, so if we synthesize that incredible idea, maybe here's a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to explore on your own. Epicurus' system, especially with this multiple explanations approach, seems to demand a really radical kind of epistemological humility, a willingness to accept uncertainty where certainty isn't needed for peace.
That's a great way to frame it.
So the question is, in our modern world, which often feels dominated by demands for absolute dogmatic certainty, especially about incredibly complex systems like politics or climate change or the economy, things that generate huge anxiety.
Right.
Does embracing something like the Epicurean willingness to accept multiple non-contradictory, non-superstitious possibilities, to be comfortable with a degree of uncertainty, hold a key to finding tranquility in the face of today's often overwhelming complexity and information overload?
That acceptance, that deep philosophical realization that it's actually okay not to know everything with absolute certainty, as long as what you do know and how you approach knowing secures your inner peace. I think that is the enduring therapeutic power of Epicureanism.
A perfect call to action, I think, for the thoughtful listener. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Epicureanism.
It's been a